Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Colorful Cooking at Home. My name is Kerri Stewart. I'm a registered dietitian and coordinator of the Heart Resource Center over at Spartanburg Regional. This is our first Colorful Cooking at Home with 2024. We have an awesome guest, Dr. Keith D., who is a clinical researcher with Gibbs Cancer Center here with us today. There is all kinds of color going on here. Keith has made this recipe before, and it is easy. It is going to be full of flavor. We're going to talk through some really easy tips. Keith has been cooking for a while himself. He's already taught me some things about ways just to make cooking easier, ways to make it more fun. I think that's where a lot of us struggle is we don't necessarily want to take the time to prep the food, and it seems like a lot or there's a lot of ingredients, but there are ways we can make it easier and fun.
That's correct. Yeah.
So Keith, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right. So my name is Keith D. I am a clinical research doctor at Gibbs Cancer Center in Greer, South Carolina. What I do is I focus on lung cancer studies and what they call phase 1 trials. These trials are all designed to bring patients with lung cancer new treatments and better treatments as we move forward towards the cure for cancer. Gibbs Cancer Center, we have coordinators that focus on all different sites. So regardless of the type of cancer you have, there may be a clinical trial that you can enroll in. So the most important thing is always talk to your doctor if you do get a new diagnosis of cancer about the possibility of clinical trials.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing this. Gibbs Cancer Center has been around for several years now. I see a lot of great things happening in the world of cancer treatment. So definitely with that diagnosis, don't get down about it. Get up and get going and get with your doctor. So yeah.
And put some good food in your belly while you're at it.
Cook with color.
There we go. Cooking can be very therapeutic for people. I find myself, the more Keith and I have been talking about this, and the more I've been hosting these events with folks, the more I'm learning from everyone, and it's becoming easier for me in a lot of ways too. So don't forget that cooking is like anything else. Practice makes perfect. So the more you do, the easier it gets. So is there anything else that you want to say before we get started?
No, just that definitely cooking is a passion of mine. I've been doing it for a long time. And like what you will find in cooking is the first time you do it is always going to be the most difficult. But through trial and error is how you make things, look good, taste good. So don't ever, feel any fear or feel like you can't do something. Just keep practicing.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I've, gone through my cooking career, is just basically to just keep trying new things, and with new things you learn new things. So
yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to putting this meal in my belly. It is a Greek sheet pan recipe. Everything's going to go on one tray to cook, essentially. What Keith and I have done is we're going to do a little bit of TV magic for you. So we have actually already put half of the recipe into the oven to get it to bake while we start from scratch and show you how to do the rest of it. So with that being said, we always want to practice food safety first. Keith and I have already washed our hands multiple times today, but we are going to do it one more time. Keith has short hair, but I've got my hair back so that I don't get any of my long hair into Keith's food, because we really don't know each other that well, but I wouldn't mind if it was in someone else's food. So
a little extra protein never hurts, but not that tight.
Okay, so we'll do that, and then we'll get to chopping. All right. So Keith is going to do most of the cooking, prepping. I'm really going to be here to be his assistant and learn, like I said, a couple of tricks that we've already been talking about. So I believe we're going to start with a dressing and a marinade type. I guess it's not really a marinade, is it? It's really just...
It's more of a dressing.
A dressing that goes on top.
It's a Greek dressing. So one thing that I like to tell people based on what I've learned in my time in the kitchen is, the first time I ever cooked anything, I just started cooking. I looked at the recipe line number 1 and I looked at it and I did it. And as you get down into the meat of the recipe, you realize there were probably things I could have done that would have made it easier, faster, and just more efficient. So what I like to always tell people when they want to know about cooking a recipe is to look at all the ingredients and look at the amounts of the ingredients and whatnot, and to almost basically get your stuff set up ahead of time.
Yeah.
When you set your things up ahead of time, as we have in this recipe here, we have our olive oil, salt, pepper, garlic, and oregano. These are all things you can do ahead of time. You don't necessarily need fancy little bowls. You can use little, dishes or cups or whatnot. But it also makes it a lot easier when you're getting ready to start that you'll say, oh, I need a half a teaspoon of salt. Well, what if you didn't look that you had salt in the cupboard? Maybe you didn't have any salt or pepper or another ingredient. So just make sure that you get your stuff out ahead of time.
Yep.
The other thing I like to do is I like to have a bowl when I do vegetables, which is what this recipe is really the basis of the cooking is. You're cooking with a lot of vegetables and a lot of color. And we all know that that's very healthy to add more color to your meals, is to have a bowl for your scraps. So you're not always cutting and having to lean down and throw it out or whatnot. You just put everything into that bowl. And then when you're done at the end, you can dump that one bowl. And it makes things a lot easier. And also, to have a bowl, if you're doing a lot of vegetables and they're all going to be mixed together, to have them to go into that bowl too. So really, preparation is probably going to save you a lot of time in the long run. So you're not scrambling during the recipe. Yeah. So as you said, we're going to start with the dressing.
Great.
And so basically with this dressing, we are going to start with lemon juice. All right. And so Kerri's actually found me a really good soft lemon. Mm-hmm. One trick that I have learned in my time is if you want to get more juice out of a lemon is to set that lemon down and you're going to roll it back and forth. Do you want to stand on the mat and have him zoom
in for you so you can see?
So basically I will roll that lemon. You can just feel it softening up, and that will make a big difference in the amount of lemon juice that you're going to do at the end of this recipe. The next thing we will do is we will cut that lemon in half. Make sure I got the knife on the right side here. And you can see that already juicing.
Yeah. I got some good ones this time.
So let me pull that out of there. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's really good. So again, if you feel like you don't have one of these lemon squeezers and you need some lemon juice, I will tell you right now that there are other ways you can squeeze the lemon. What is really a smart thing to do if you're going to squeeze a lemon that has a lot of seeds in it is you're going to hold your fingers underneath it and you're going to squeeze it with the other hand, and that's going to catch all those seeds. That's something that I have learned over time. And if, for say, instance, you don't have any fresh lemon in your fridge, you can buy real lemon juice from the store. That sometimes can be something that you can substitute. Yeah. Right. I would always recommend using a fresh fruit or vegetable for what you're doing. Yeah. I guess I don't even have my bowl up here like I'm supposed to have. Look at it. I don't even follow my own rules.
It's taken me a long time to get that into my head, but my trash can in my kitchen is far from my island.
That's right.
And it is unbelievable how many steps I save, how much stress I save when I just have my scrap bowl out.
Not only that, but one other thing is definitely have a towel ready when you are cooking in the kitchen, because there's going to be a lot of things you touch that, just like the lemon, I went back and got paper towels, but really if you have a towel present, which is something I had put there originally, that would really helps you to kind of move along.
Yep.
So the next part of the ingredients is going to be, we are going to do some oregano.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Some salt. Pepper. Now we're going to use fresh garlic in a clove and dice it up, but you can also use minced garlic from the store. Mm-hmm. I find that really does work very well in these recipes when you do the minced garlic.
Yep.
If you've never done a clove of garlic before, the best way is to find a bigger knife. Hopefully we don't obviously need something that big, but you're going to smash it. And so when you smash that, you can actually peel off that outside very easily.
Look at that. Just comes right off.
Just comes right out.
Doesn't need to be pretty because you're just going to keep chopping it all up anyway, right?
You just want to get that paper off the outside of it.
Yep. So easy.
And that's something that, mincing things
So we've got a lot of garlic, we've got lemon juice already, we've got oregano. So that's really considered a leafy green. Folks don't really think of our herbs as leafy greens, but there's already a whole lot of anti-inflammatory compounds going into this dish, which is what we want. So those compounds are going to help fight cancer. They're going to help lower blood pressure. So we did add salt in here, but this is the dressing that's going to go across everything. And so salt can not only help kind of draw out some of the moisture of the vegetables, but it'll also keep the water in the chicken, which will keep that moist. So
something that I found with this recipe that really attracted me to it was the fact that this is so simple. Like, I could not believe how simple this recipe was for the first time I did it. I thought it was going to take me a long time to put all this together, and I started putting it together and I was like, wow, it's done and it's ready to go in the oven. So the simplicity of this recipe and the ingredients, but the amount of flavor you get out of it, and the end of the result is just beautiful in this recipe. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to mix up that lemon juice and those seasonings with a whisk. And then something that, you might see if you watch any cooking shows is they always tell you to add the olive oil slow. So that basically what you're trying to do is emulsify that. If you pour it in one shot, everything's going to separate out because you got water and you got oil in there. But if you go in slow and you mix it up, it'll actually mix together much better.
You may see some dressing recipes call for mustard. Mustard is a natural emulsifier. So as Keith mentioned, that's really just a fancy word for helping combine our oil ingredients and our fat-based ingredients and our water-based ingredients. So in this case, lemon juice is our water-based ingredient. And so you do it slow, you mix it all up, and then you pretty much immediately pour it on your dish and you're good to go. So we'll mix that up again later.
Okay.
But clean off his workstation a little bit. I'm already noticing Keith is good at doing that. I'm not as good at doing that, but a clean workstation is also a safe workstation.
That's something I've learned is as they always say, cleanliness is next to godliness. But when you clean off your workstation, it just makes things go much easier in the long run. All right. So I guess the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut some vegetables up.
All right.
So we have an orange pepper here. I actually, in this recipe, it calls for an orange pepper and
a red pepper.
A red pepper. So I actually bought a pack of a red, orange, and yellow pepper and used that for the recipe I did at home. But that adds all that color and that flavor. Each one of those peppers has a different flavor, but it really brings out the taste of the olive oil and the lemon juice and everything when you add it to these peppers, because they got a little bit of sweetness to counteract that acidity and that lemon. So we're going to start with the pepper, and a trick that I have learned about cutting peppers that took me probably as many years as I've been cooking until recently. Everyone always asks, how do you cut up a pepper so that it's just easier to cut with all those seeds and all that stuff that comes out of it? And so what I found with the peppers is that if you flip them over and you take your knife and you find the seams on these peppers and you just cut them down to the bottom.
You're already blowing my mind. I've never seen anyone do it this way yet.
But one thing I will tell you ahead of time is just cut that top off so you don't lose all that meat that's at the top.
Yeah. Okay.
So now what we do is when we pull each one of these pieces off, you can see that the seeds stay inside the main husk that's there.
And we got a bonus pepper.
And there's
a baby pepper.
Pepper inside a pepper. More like an alien, maybe.
Yeah, that one actually just.
But anyway, you can see that every one of those pieces came off without the seeds, and that was something when I found that out. And I'm not going to say that I figured it out. I thought in a video, so I don't want to take too much credit. But I always try to use everything when we're doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
But when you're cutting peppers, this one, because this is something that you're going to be eating, you want a little bit larger pieces because we're roasting these peppers. And so a lot of times we will cut them into pieces that are much bigger.
Yep. I like that too. Gives it a little more. I mean, and obviously this is something that you can play around with a little bit. However, since we are cooking the chicken in with it, you want your pieces to be a little bit bigger so that, because they're going to cook for a long time with the chicken. I mean, we're talking 35 minutes or so, give or take. We did preheat our oven to about 425. So that's how hot we're talking, but if you have your pieces too small, then you risk burning those and your chicken not being cooked all the way. So.
All right, the next part of the recipe is going to be our red onion.
Beautiful.
So we'll cut that one in half and then cut that. I'm actually going to use the bigger knife.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that into chunks.
Okay.
So basically what I did is I cut the ends off and then I basically halve it and then just cut some sections out, right?
Yeah.
You want about 1 inch, right about 1 inch squares.
Okay.
And I mean, this really, you want to do that?
Yeah. How about that?
That right there is, you're just basically going to just separate that onion.
Okay.
So that every one of those pieces can come in contact with the marinade.
Everyone. Okay.
All of them.
Yes, sir.
Even the little tiny ones. We don't want anyone left out of this recipe.
Yeah, it just wouldn't be fair. I mean, the homemade dressing that really didn't take you much effort at all,
No,
but
that was probably one of the easiest dressings I've ever done. Another addition here is to get some green in here. That's going to be our zucchini. The zucchini is going to pair very nice with these peppers and onions. And so what I've learned about cutting zucchini is first you cut off the corners, the ends or whatnot, and then you just cut it down longitudinally. So you're going to have two halves like that. And then for this recipe, they're asking for the half moon pieces. So after you've cut them, then basically you just want to have that with the cut side up. And then you're just basically going to half these. And you want to make sure they have some thickness to them because you are roasting these. If you make them too thin, then they're going to get like very flimsy and soft. You want try to get a little crisp on them.
Yeah.
I'm cutting slow, so I don't cut my fingers off on live TV.
That's one of the things that I just learned last year, if I am going to admit something to you, is I don't know why I used to take the zucchini and I would cut the circles first down the whole zucchini and then go back and stack them up and cut them in half. And that is not efficient, but it had never dawned on me to just cut it in half lengthwise first. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
And so basically,
and then our cherry tomatoes.
Cherry tomatoes. Now, are you zoomed in? Okay.
Yeah.
So cherry tomatoes, obviously will come in different sizes. You can cut them in half. These are smaller, so I would love to just put these right in that dish. And, a lot of times when you cook those smaller ones and you roast them in the oven like that, they just have that beautiful pop when you put them in your mouth and you bite into them.
I love it.
If they're larger, cut them in half. And that would really, both ways works. There's no wrong way to cooking. When you're cooking, there's no wrong way to do it. Just don't burn it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. No wrong way, just a safe way.
All right. So we got all our vegetables in there.
All right.
At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to marinate those vegetables with a little bit of the marinade.
Okay.
And I guess I keep calling it a marinade, but it really is more like a sauce.
Yeah.
All right. So in the recipe, it really says to use like a 1/4 cup of the sauce and just marinate those. I'm just going to pour a little bit over the top.
One thing I do want everyone to know is we've split this recipe in half so that we can have half already done for you. But look how much we've already used. This is a normal sized Pyrex dish, glass baking dish, which we chose because we wanted it to have the lips on the sides. We didn't want any of that dressing spilling out anywhere. So
part of the recipe at the end tells you to use some of the juices that are left over to pour back over after you plate that. So the best way to do that is to use a higher side on here so that you can tilt it at the end and actually take a spoon and get some of those juices out. Now, I had thought about using tongs, but I will tell you this. There is no shame in getting your hands dirty when you're cooking in the kitchen.
All right.
We've washed our hands. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to
we got to reconnect with our food.
That's right. That's right. You want to be up close and personal with your food because you are going to be much closer to that food when you get to the end and start eating it.
Speaking of being close to your food, one thing I've learned about you is that you have citrus trees.
That is right. That is right. Yeah, I do. I have a ruby red grapefruit tree. I have a lemon tree and I have a lime tree. And I've had them for about 5 to 7 years now. I grow them in pots. And in the summertime, they will sit outside. And in the wintertime, after I pick the fruit, I will bring them in. You really don't want to let them get below 30 degrees that over any length of time. And so they've done really well for me. Yeah.
So is it true that it takes a long time before you actually produce any fruit?
Yeah, usually a couple years. You'll get flowers right away, but
Okay.
usually a couple years it takes before,
Okay.
because in the beginning, you want that plant to grow. So if you get any fruit in the first year or two, you want to pluck that off and let the plant, all that energy get into the plant and let it get strong, let the branches get strong, and you want that to be. But usually by about the third year, you'll get some fruit. You might get a lot of flowers, and I'm going to tell you, those are the most fragrant flowers that you've ever seen or smelled, I guess I should say. But you'll get a lot of flowers, you'll get some fruit, and a lot will drop off, but over time, you'll get more and more each year.
Okay.
Yeah. I get about 20 limes a year on my tree, and they're about 3 feet right now in the pots. About 4 lemons and about 2 or 3 grapefruit right now.
So you already had your harvest?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So usually you will pick them usually by December, January at the latest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you ever notice that orange season is January in Florida. So you always watch on TV if we get those deep freezes in Florida, and they're watering their orchards to protect those oranges from dying. So
I just bought a bag of grapefruits, and here I could have gone to your house.
That's right. Yeah, they're not very big. They're usually about, I don't know, probably about 4 inches across, but it's mine. So that's what makes it so good.
Doesn't it taste so much better because you did it?
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that.
Okay,
well, I look forward to trying this recipe with Keith's lemons next time.
There you go. Right. Okay. So I've marinated the vegetables have now got a good olive oil and lemon juice coating with those seasonings in there. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to place the chicken breast. Chicken breast. This recipe calls for boneless, skinless chicken thighs. And I believe that there are other substitutions. You can use chicken breast. You can use salmon. You can use white fish. A lot of times when you're using something like salmon or fish, you'll want to cook the vegetables for about 15 minutes at 425, then add the salmon to it and cook it at maybe another 15 or 20 minutes, depending on the recipe.
Yeah.
So you don't overcook that salmon and you're not going to burn it. You're probably just more going to dry it out. So what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that the chicken is in contact with the bottom.
Okay.
So that the chicken's cooking from both sides throughout the recipe.
All right.
And we're just going to put our vegetables around that.
All right.
The next thing I'm going to do is this recipe calls for 2 different types of olives. I believe we have the Kalamata olives.
We do.
Which are your dark olives. I mean, to me, all olives taste very similar, but they're very pretty. And so we will sprinkle those throughout the recipe. If you don't like olives, or you have your spouse likes olives and you don't, you can just put them on half and don't put them on the other half.
Yeah.
But the other thing you can also do is you can add other vegetables, like maybe you like asparagus. So you can cut up asparagus and put it in this recipe.
That'd be a good one.
You could add squash. You can add any vegetable you want to this.
Yeah.
Because you're basically sauteing these vegetables. We have tomatoes in there. If tomatoes can survive that cook, then I think anything can.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so these are
the Castrel. Here, let me see.
Castelvetrano
There we
olives.
go. There we go.
So
you can do them whole, or you can cut them up because these are bigger olives.
Yeah.
So you can slice these in half so that maybe you don't get that whole olive when you're eating that part of the.
I have never heard of these. I've never seen these before. Or I realize I've seen them in the grocery store. I just didn't know that's what they were called. Yeah. And so it said that they were a little less maybe pungent or so I'm going to try one. I've never tried one.
See, I love olives. So that's one of the things when I saw this recipe, I was like, absolutely, put as many olives as you can in there.
So that and
that also, that's one of the reasons why the recipe calls for salting all the vegetables ahead of time, the meat ahead of time and everything. But when you add these olives, if you like olives, there's enough salt in those olives to kind of add that flavor to the recipe. So if you want to cut back on your salt, which I'm sure Kerri will totally agree with, people should cut back on their salt especially if they have any type of heart conditions, that you can just use some of the other seasonings. You could try a Mrs. Dash, which has no sodium in it.
Yep.
But you're going to get your sodium from the lemon juice is going to be a little salty, and then your olives and whatnot. The feta is going to have some salt in it.
Yep.
So one of the other ingredients that we like to do before we marinate it at the end is I actually bought a block of feta. You can buy canisters of it, which a lot of it is a little more grated up into like a powder. But I'm going to tell you that this feta, when you cut this up and you bake this in the oven, I mean, it just came out amazing. It doesn't melt. It just gets a little crust on it. And that little crust and that feta flavor with the rest of the ingredients was just amazing.
So Keith's exactly right. We do need to be mindful of our sodium. I first have to say that I didn't mind that olive.
Right.
It does have an olivey taste, but it was described as more buttery and, like I said, a little less pungent. And I feel like that's a very good way to describe it. But it takes us on average 10 tries of a food before we really figure out whether or not we like something or we don't. And one thing that we know is whether you're undergoing cancer treatment or not, your taste buds change throughout your entire life. So even if you don't think you like something, it's always worth continuing to try it. So I'm glad I tried that olive because it actually, I can see that being really good. And
it's not so bad, is it?
It wasn't nearly as a black olive is what I always think of. That's always what comes to mind.
Yes,
but
they don't have as much flavor. They're bland. They're bland. And these really have, like, the texture is great on these olives and the flavor.
Yeah.
If you prefer something a little more salty, then these olives are definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
So when I do the feta, I like to cut it up in just the little chunks. All right. So you just basically cut that block up into little chunks, and then we're going to sprinkle that throughout the meal.
So our feta is going to have salt. Our olives are going to have salt. We did add some salt to our dressing, and there was a little bit of salt that we put on the chicken, salt and pepper there. But remember that this meal, this is going to be divided, by 4, 6,
that's right,
maybe even 8 people, depending on.
Right. We did 2 in this one, and we have 2 in the other.
Yeah.
But, the recipe itself called for 6 to 8 chicken thighs.
Okay.
Or you could do 2 breasts. I would probably recommend, if you do a breast, to do 1 or 2 things, and maybe we can do this in another lesson down the road, is showing people how to pound that chicken out to a uniform, or you can actually slice it in half the long way so that you actually have a more uniform thickness, because chicken breasts are very rounded off, and one section may cook more than the other depending on what's going on.
So it helps you cook more evenly.
So another thought I had is, when I did this recipe at home and I started to pour that dressing over the chicken breast, it tends to run off the chicken breast. And really what you want at the end is you want to coat those chicken breasts first, because you want to get as much of that flavor onto that chicken. We got that garlic in there and the oregano and the lemon and olive oil, but really you want all that to soak into that chicken while it's cooking. So there are other things. I'm going to use a spoon because I did not bring basically my marinade brush, if you've ever seen those.
Basting brush.
Basting brush. Yeah. They have great ones nowadays that have little rubber tentacles instead of the old bristles that you can throw in the dishwasher, and they do very well. So what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to get some of this really good thick part of the marinade, and I'm going to put it over the chicken breasts. And with the spoon, I'm just going to basically rub it in a little bit. All right. That garlic on there and that oregano is going to really add some great flavor to this dish. All right, and then with the rest of the marinade, even though we pre-coated all our vegetables, we are just going to drizzle that over the rest of the meal. That will coat some of the feta and that will coat the olives, but at the end of the day, everybody's got to join in. So we got to get everybody to have a little bit of dressing.
We would never want any vegetable to be left out.
All right, so if you want to zoom in, this is what it looks like. I mean, it almost looks good enough to eat before you even put it in the oven, right? There's all that color, and then you got oranges, reds, greens, and then that feta and those olives just really make this a great dish.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to put this one in the oven, 425 for 35 minutes in the center of the oven. And that's so you can get that to cook from the bottom and the top at the same time. The recipe does ask, if you really want a good crisp or char on it, you can move it to the top of the oven at the end for the last maybe 5 or 10 minutes and use the broiler. But I worry about that sometimes because, you know, if you're not paying attention, you could forget that it's under broil and you could have burnt everything. Yep. So it really is something you just got to pay attention to what you're doing.
That would be a sad day if we did all of this.
All that work and then you don't have your meal.
All right, I'm going to wash my hands one more time. Okay. If you want to bring the cutting board over here, we will show everyone our finished product. So that worked out pretty much perfectly.
So what do you want me to do?
You can just leave it right there.
Okay. And then put that over here.
If anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to type in the chat there for us, please, and we will get to them. It sounds like we have one now. So amounts of everything, we will go ahead and send out the recipe to you after we are done here. But just so you know, we did the full recipe is 2 lemons, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano. Keith and I are both fans of garlic, so we always add more, but 2 cloves of garlic. And then it called for 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. We didn't do any more than about 1/2 teaspoon. Again, because there's so much salt in other places, you can always add more, but you can't take it away. So keep that in mind with your sodium. Just to make sure everyone remembers, the American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So when you divide that into 3 meals, that's about 600 to 700 breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That might give you a little bit for a snack as well. So keep your sodium in mind. And then we've got 3/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. And it said 3/4 of a cup of olive oil, but we, again, both agreed that it didn't need quite that much. And so we used closer to 2/3, and you could probably even just get by with a half a cup.
Yeah.
But again, because we divided it like that, it worked. But I think it actually cooked very evenly this way. Where did I put our hot hands? Here they are. All right. So then there's a lot you can do with this after. So yeah, you could just eat it fairly simply.
Right.
Thank you. All right, ready? Ta-da! TV magic. All right.
That looks really good.
It looks beautiful. Yeah. Look at the cheese. So let's talk about that for a second.
The feta does not melt.
No, that's very interesting. So I did get the traditional feta. Traditional feta cheese from Europe is made with sheep's and goat's milk, actually. And so the thing about sheep's milk and goat's milk is that usually those animals are still left to graze and eat what they are naturally supposed to. Unfortunately, not all of the dairy cows in our country are able to do that. So what that means is that that nutrition that they're getting from these wild herbs that they're eating from the grass, so those omega-3 fatty acids that we find in grass, actually do translate to the milk and therefore the cheese. So this is lower in saturated fat. It's higher in antioxidants. It's higher in a lot of our B vitamins as well. And so that's a good reason to try. I think this is a good way to try a feta cheese like that. I wouldn't consider myself a quote unquote goat cheese person.
Right.
Some people are, some people are not. But in this case, you know, we've got it kind of all mixed in there together, and it's really just giving that pop of salt, that savory flavor to go along with it.
I agree.
So
yeah, it's like a good, it is, the feta is actually, it doesn't melt, but it's a little cream, it's a creamy nature when it comes out of the oven. It's almost like it melts a little on the inside.
I love it.
Anyways, there's several ways you can plate this and things you can do with it. And I know Kerri's going to show you. You can cook some brown rice to go with this, because this is really, when you talk about, there's no carbohydrates in here other than the minor carbs that are found in vegetables.
Right.
But I always consider things in vegetables to be negligible because of the nutritional benefit of a vegetable, any type of carbs that come in fruits and vegetables and whatnot.
Right.
So Kerri's going to talk about the different ways to plate this. So one of the things that we talk about too, and when you're cooking chicken especially, but any meat, is always making sure that the chicken has come to the proper temperature for consumption.
Thank you for bringing
And
that up.
so I know that the FDA usually asks that your food be at 160 degrees or greater. And so we have a digital thermometer that we have brought out to use. I used mine at home. And so you just want to stick that into a meaty portion of that chicken thigh.
This is what we've got here.
And make sure it's at least 160. Now, this might have cooled a little bit while it's sitting out, but that is something to just make sure. You don't have to have digital. You can use a regular meat thermometer if you have one that just has numbers on it.
We're already at 175 and continuing to count.
There you go.
So
we know the chicken is done.
Yep.
And that anything that could have been in the chicken is cooked off, and there's no threat of any type of foodborne illness.
I can't believe how I kind of just took this spatula and I mean, I need a little
thighs,
bit,
they're tender, and
wow.
so these are one of the reasons that these recipes use chicken thighs is there's more flavor in a chicken thigh and actually a little more fat. So yes, there's a few more calories, but you actually get more flavor, and the fat content they tend to almost braise a little, like when you have a good steak that's got a lot of marbling in it. This chicken will cook up real nice and tender, and it won't dry out. Is one of the big things that you're concerned about.
So
I'll let you talk about how your different platings go.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring the utensils over.
Great. I'm going to make a little salad over here. So obviously you can make this even easier with just store-bought, pre-washed salad greens. There's hummus that's already, again, store-bought, ready to go in that way. And we can put some chicken on there, or if you're vegetarian, you can omit that. You can add chickpeas. I think that's something you could easily add to this dish in general to cook too, are chickpeas.
Yeah,
so
chickpeas
you get a little more fiber that way.
A lot of protein.
Lots of protein.
Actually, I really like chickpeas.
Yeah.
Not everybody does, but they're actually really good.
And again, you're getting all this great sauce, and then you almost have a dressing. Isn't that what we did? So you could, if everyone in the family wanted to have a salad, then you could reserve a little bit of your homemade dressing to put on the top here at the very end if you wanted to do that. So here we go. We've got this beautiful salad there. And then maybe you want some pitas going on. So we can plate it that way for that. Or as we mentioned, you could put your rice in a bowl. You can just have a nice big bowl of it. Or you could spread some hummus on your pita, and you could go ahead and we could put some veggies down. You could put some extra lettuce on there if you wanted. And I'm just going to cut up this chicken a little bit more into these bite-sized pieces. Oh, I can see all the dressing that's left. Yeah.
So the recipe states, basically that's why we use that deep dish, is so that you can at the end, after you've plated your food, you can actually tilt that in with a nice ladle-like spoon, pour that over your dish so that you get that extra flavor that's kind of soaked into everything in the bottom.
I love it. All right. Are there any more questions anyone has for Keith or myself while you're here? Let us know, and we will go ahead and I wish I had a nice little, what I need is a toothpick to hold everything together there, hold it upright, but we'll do that. And then, yep, just a bowl like that. And we've got some parsley over here.
So something you can also do for presentation is add some parsley that you've chopped up ahead of time over top at the end, if you're having dinner guests or whatnot.
Or apparently rip with your fingers.
Or rip with your fingers, yes. Usually it just adds some extra color to those vegetables and everything.
Parsley is actually one of, again, we're talking leafy greens. It is one of those things that has a lot of nitric oxide, which is a dilator. So it's going to open up your blood vessels, and that relaxes your arteries around your heart and to the top of your head, to the bottom of your feet. So then that thereby helps lower blood pressure. And if you have enough of this nitric oxide that you're continuing to eat over time, it can actually start to create this nice anti-inflammatory reaction that can start to chip away at the bad cholesterol, the plaque that's already built up in your arteries.
That's
so
excellent. And that's
don't
really
forget.
why we cook with the more color you have in vegetables, usually the more antioxidants that are in those vegetables.
Yep.
And that really is the goal. I'm going to tell you right now, this tastes amazing.
I can't wait.
So
okay.
I had to go ahead and start trying it. I'm going to try the chicken, but the vegetables are that flavor from that dressing. And you saw how simple it was. So you're talking about lemon juice, olive oil, oregano, salt, pepper. I mean, garlic. I mean, that's like the most simple marinade you can have. That's really delicious. Good.
Well done.
Thank you. I think that's really good.
You're right. I like the creaminess of the feta. It's interesting that it doesn't melt in that way, but it did. It kind of browned. It roasted like the vegetables do. And if you're thinking that the dressing is too powerful or something.
Wendell says really we have a question.
Oh, good. Sorry. I'm busy talking and eating.
On removing the garlic before you're cooking. I honestly, from my experience and things I've read over time, I think there's a lot of health properties that are associated with garlic.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, on the off chance there's a vampire in the area, you might ward off these vampires. But really, I think there's a lot of benefits to eating garlic. It could be personal preference. It could be just a cultural thing.
Yeah. One of the things, not to get too sciencey, but about to get too sciencey about garlic, is part of the reason we love it. It's one of these white foods. It's actually very, it helps our liver do the detoxifying that it needs to. So there's all these pathways. That's part of what our liver as an organ, its job is to do these detoxifying pathways. And so one of the things that garlic does is it's actually able to help. It has these nutrients in it that helps our liver do that. The problem is when you're cooking it quickly, like in a saute, we degrade all of those compounds.
Right.
So we either want to eat it, or what we've learned is if you cook it for a really long time, roasting it, it actually enhances them as well. So if we're cooking it in this case for a long time, you're actually going to bring back all of those beneficial white compounds that, like I said, can help the liver enzymes work better. So, I mean, a vegetable, I do agree with you. It's a personal preference thing, I think. If you don't want to eat the garlic like that, you don't have to. But if you prefer to have a little bit of flavor in it, then, but not eat the garlic, you can, like you said, smash it, but leave them whole. So that way some of it's all cooking together. You
really, that would seep into that juice in the bottom.
Yeah. The name of this game is whatever's gonna be eaten by you and your family, right? So the more vegetables, I mean, we don't want to necessarily become these short order cooks where, I'm making this for Keith and I'm making this for me and I'm making this for Wendell, but we do want to be, if we can leave olives off of half of it, then and everyone's happy. That's a really easy thing.
And there's no wrong answer to, you want to add a green pepper, add a green pepper.
Right.
You want to take the zucchini out, you want to add asparagus. There's no wrong answer. And these vegetables, all these vegetables taste amazing with this dressing on there.
I love the versatility of this.
Excellent. Yeah. And like I said, fish, breast chicken, thighs.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we've got kind of a little bit of everything here. I'm going to move this
that's not
just so that it smells great in here. We wish you were here.
It's really good.
It's great.
I'm not going to lie.
We are going to enjoy ourselves a late lunch if we don't have any other questions. But before that, I want to make you aware of what is coming up next. So next month is American Heart Month. So we will have all sorts of great opportunities. Cooking with Cardiology is coming up in February. Deanna Cram is going to do a homemade butternut squash semolina pasta.
Wow.
Which is already blowing my mind as well. And then We actually decided to do, since it's January, everyone's looking for recipes. We decided to do a full day of colorful cooking at home. So that is actually next Monday, January 29th. You can join for one, you can join for none of them. But if you register, you will get the recording and you'll get the recipe that way. So check out spartanburgregional.com/events for our events, for the Cancer Center's events as well. There's a lot of wellness related upcoming opportunities and some really fun Heart Month specials. So we're also going to have a speaker on women and heart health through the life cycle that will be here at Gibbs Cancer Center on Valentine's Day. So come be our Valentines as well.
So I will just touch on this with what Kerri's saying is, I know one of the questions was about the amounts of everything we were putting in the dish. So
yeah.
The great news is Kerri's going to send you out this recipe.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're making this recipe, you can pull this video back up. And if there was a question, you're like, oh my God, I forgot how to do that. How did they do that?
Yep.
Just pull that video up and find that spot and just watch it again. What you'll find is I didn't adhere to this recipe 100%. I actually made some modifications because I thought cherry tomatoes would be better or a lot more fun than actual a whole tomato cut up into pieces. So if you see that it has a whole tomato cut into wedges, you're welcome to do anything you want with this recipe. Take it and change it however you want to change it. That dressing is what makes the recipe, the feta, everything makes that recipe. Like I said, don't use olives if you don't want them, but really I think everything's wonderful.
Okay, names of the olives. We used the Kalamata olives,
which are the red ones. Kalamata, which is a K, Kalamata, and then we have a hard time saying this, Castelvetrano. And so, if you can you zoom in or?
Yep, and if you want to hold it up a little bit,
there we go.
How's that? Down. All right, Castelvetrano.
Green olives.
Yeah,
that's how I look at them. But
they're more circular. They're almost,
there's a lot of different types of olives out there.
Olives are oval shaped.
I was discussing with Kerri prior to doing this that, it's not like we want to say that you should go to any given store or any given time, but I found a lot of ingredients at Aldi for a really good price. So you then, a lot of questions will come in that say, well, how much is this going to cost me? If it's expensive, I don't want to do it. Well, you can buy a lot of your produce from Aldi very cheap. Yeah. I found the feta at Aldi. I know you talked about the fact that yours was actually more, more of a natural type of feta that was used.
And I got it at Lidl. So.
And if you want, to make things easier, Ingles has an olive bar.
Yeah.
So you can go and pick your olives off of Ingles bar and buy, you don't want to buy a whole jar.
Yeah.
Basically a whole jar. And then you go, well, what if I don't use them all or whatnot? But Ingles, you can buy as much as you want or as little as you want on a salad bar. So there's just little tricks and things that, again, you go to the store, you choose.
Right.
But that's one of the places that I found some things that were really good. So
I think I spent 36 cents on just all this calls for is 1/4 of a cup of the Kalamata olives. So I went to the olive bar, got, I don't know, it might have been 12, maybe a little bit more than that. And like I said, I think it was 36 cents. So there we go. And now I'm surprised at how I'm enjoying the Castelvetrano olives in this dish as a not olive lover.
Right.
But that's why it can never hurt to try.
Question? There you go.
There we go.
That's right.
So one thing I can do is also send out the recipe halved so that you have the exact ingredients listed that way too, in case you don't need a full batch, because that is, and you could easily have squeezed the 4 thighs into that instead.
That's right. And you could have 2 meals out of that too. That you did all 4 in that pan. And I guess, who wants to sit and calculate what half of a 3/4 teaspoon is, right?
Right.
So, fractions aren't always our friends.
No.
So
again,
she'll put that in there, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. Perfect.
Exactly.
Excellent.
So we did, one thing I brought too were capers. We didn't end up playing with those a little bit, but that would go very well with this. Capers are actually a flower bud, technically, of a plant that have been pickled, and they have a little bit more of a lemony flavor. They still are going to give you that salty bite,
Right.
but it's very different than an olive. So if you've never tried that, you may like capers. So you could easily throw capers in here. Instead, you're going to get that savory flavor. They are a bit lemony is kind of the best way to describe them. They are very cheap as well. So a little bit will go a long way. And that was less than $2 for
Something else too is when you consider like the flavor in this meal.
Yeah.
If you don't want to put any salt in it through the whole meal, I think you could get away with no salt
Agreed.
added based on all the ingredients we put in there.
Yep.
And maybe you get to the end and you plate it out and you say, I could use a little salt. And maybe you just put a little on at the
Yep.
end. That really is going to go a long way, I think.
Agreed.
Yep.
And when we put it right on top, that's what our tongue touches too.
Right.
So that's what you taste. And that's the whole point of salting it, right? We want to taste the salt.
That's right.
But if you're mixing it in to all these other things, or, that's why our processed foods can get so high in sodium, is because it's just in every little
Right.
step of the way. But really, we just need it on the top to touch our tongue to say this tastes salty.
Yeah.
And then that's a really kind of sneaky way to reduce the sodium overall. So agreed. Yep. All right. Anything else?
Anything?
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you again for having me.
Keith, I appreciate it so much.
I love doing it. So,
and I can't wait to enjoy this delicious meal with you. So
thank you.
We can't wait to see everyone again. Thank you for joining us.
Have a great day, everybody.